Okay, it appears we are indeed up, running and live. Good evening from Dubai. It's Phil Pendlebury here, and I hope you're having a super mega large day. For those of you joining us from the Middle East, assalamu alaikum, mahaba, good to have you with us too. So I did mention at the end of last month's stream, I don't know if you caught that, but I mentioned that we were going to be looking at something quite exciting this month, definitely exciting for me. It's something that you might be aware of now, which is, of course, the release of Wavelab 12. I've been very lucky. I've been using it for the past few months and even had some input on features and so on. And I'm very happy to be chatting about it with you today. So what's Wavelab 12? Obviously, if you already used Wavelab in any shape or form, then basically Wavelab 12 is a new version of Wavelab with about 80 plus new features and lots of improvements to the user interface. What I want to do today is kind of familiarize you with various areas of the program. So this will apply to beginners as well as, probably some more advanced users. So I'm going to be showing you some of the new features and guiding you, how to set things up, getting ready to master an album or a single file, whatever it might be. Of course, the point here is that a lot of people don't realize how powerful Wavelab can be. And I know that there's a lot of people, even associates of mine in the past, who've used their own DAW, i.e., Cubase, Nuendo, Pro Tools, or whatever, to actually do their mastering. But Wavelab offers a lot more scope for mastering tasks. There's a lot of practical and very innovative tools involved in Wavelab 12 and in Wavelab in general, really. But like I said, in version 12, we now have over 80 new features, and I'm looking forward to showing you through it. So I think that's about it for the intro. Hope you're all doing well, and good to have a few people with us, especially some of the familiar faces. I've got, of course, Terry here monitoring the chat, so I'm going to be in full live stream mode, trying not to be too boring, without too many pauses and ums and ahs. So he'll be monitoring the chat and throwing over questions to me, which I'll try and answer as we're going along. So let's move in, and the first thing I want to show you is actually the new Startup Assistant. Now, you don't actually have to use this. And in the past, I've always avoided things that, this kind of thing. But it's actually really neat. So let's have a look at that, and we'll go through step by step in towards, setting up a project and getting it running. Let's move in. So here we are. You can see my very sparse desktop. And right in the center of the screen, we have the Wavelab Startup Assistant. And we can change the size of this, but actually what I'm going to do is just zoom in. Hopefully this will, there we go, that'll do nicely. And yeah, so I'm just going to show you some of the basic features of this, and this will apply to most of this stream, to be honest. There's so much stuff, it would take us a day, maybe more, to go through everything. So my plan here is to kind of skim across the surface and just lay things out, and then you can also go into more detail if you want to later on, or maybe we'll even be doing some more videos, who knows. So let's get the camera off. So there's the Startup Assistant, and what this does is gives you kind of a lot of instant ways to get things moving rather than just being launched into the main interface. Some of you who are more familiar might just want to bypass this altogether, which you can do. But I thought, it'd be a nice thing to have a quick look at. So there it is. Let's just start from the left-hand side, the tabs down here. I'm not going to go through them all right now, but these basically give you some info. There's the news tab up at the top. If we click that, it'll give you some news, a bit like Cubase and Nuendo does. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it'll give you some news. Like I said, not going to click through all these right now. And then the individual types of kind of work that you can do. So we've got a project. It tells you a little bit about what a project is. an audio montage, audio editor, which is for single files, batch processor, and then these 4 buttons at the bottom are links. That's why you can see this arrows sticking out here, links to various online resources. And we can actually close that. We can drag this little thing across here if you don't want to see any of that. And we'll just, stick with the full screen for now. So the first thing you'll see is we've got a bunch of buttons across the top, great big buttons. And these are the kind of main formats of things that you can open with the Startup Manager or create. So obviously recent files will show you things that you've been using recently of whatever kind. The project, which we'll get into in a minute because that's what we're going to be using today. Audio montage, the audio editor, and of course the very powerful batch processor. Let's show the filters here. So if I just leave this with everything, you can see these little filters. We'll try and zoom in on those. It's showing you what type of thing you can see in your list of recent files, for example. So if I click this one, then the new little logo for projects, which is these 9 little dots. If I click that, you'll see that it's only showing projects. If I click here, you'll see that we're just seeing montages, audio files, and of course batch, which I don't have any at the moment. So let's, for example, just quickly open a WAV file. Click that and hit open. And you can see that that comes up in Wavelab itself. Okay? But we're not going to do anything with this right now. We're still looking we're still looking at the Startup Assistant, but I just wanted to show you how the interaction works. Okay. So we can close this back down and we'll start Wavelab again. Or we could in fact just press the home button here and that will open the Startup Assistant again. But let's start from scratch, because there are still a few more things I'd like to talk about on the Startup Assistant screen before we move. So you've seen the filters. Obviously, if you've got hundreds of files, like, I've got quite a few going on here. If we wanted to search, you can see I put pon in there and there's pon come up. All quite intuitive and easy. And finally, at the bottom, the audio connection. So again, this really is meant for people who are just starting off, because we're going to set up audio connections in a little bit more detail once we get inside Wavelab, because it's quite important to one of the new features. In fact, one of the amazing new features. But this does give you a chance to just quickly set up your microphone, your main audio device, and your speakers and headphones. What I'd like to do today is work with the new project format. Of course, if you want to just open up a file for editing, you can do that. If you want to open up a previous montage, and for those of you that haven't used Wavelab before, a montage is basically, a bunch of tracks, all right? But you can do various things with them. And that's the one that you'd usually use for mastering purposes. For example, you'd put each song on a different track and treat them. We'll get to that in a bit. But I'd like to really go into the project thing because it's a new feature. And to be honest, there's no reason why you shouldn't just be using projects for everything now. So let's turn the camera back off. And I want to tell you what Steinberg say about projects. In Wavelab Pro, projects serve as containers for references to all the files that are associated with a particular Wavelab Pro session, allowing you to manage and recall entire sessions. Project files have an extension .wpr, which contain references to media, data pertaining to an individual Wavelab Pro session, audio files, montage files, etc. And also, within Wavelab itself, you can actually zip up a project file, get it ready to send off to someone else. And you can save your complete production as a project and open it on any Wavelab Pro workstation. And for this, the source files must be available, but there's a way of doing that as well. So, for example, when we do this project, I'm going to show you the layout of it as well. You have the option, like you do with lots of kind of video editors and so on. When you make the project, you have the option to copy the source files, even though they may be in other places, copy them all into the project structure, and that way, you know, if I was to give my project file to you, everything will just open as it would. So you can see that the new project file type is pretty powerful. Okay, so let's open one of my kind of demo projects, and that's what we're going to work on today. And this is just a group of tracks which I'm actually currently working on. I won't be able to play any audio today because obviously all this stuff will immediately get muted while we're live. It's always a problem, this. I say this every time. It's very awkward to try and actually demo some stuff in detail. This album is actually for a friend of mine, and it's a bunch of covers, but they're still recognizable. So if I play any of this more than maybe half a second, we'll just end up getting muted. So we're not going to do too much actual listening today, which is fine. So no need for the headphones today. Right, let's get on with it. I do apologize. So we're going to open my project, which contains the tracks. And all we selected project. You see the project here, and we're going to click open. And there you can see that we've got what we call a file group with a bunch of tracks. There's 5 actually. Okay, and some of them might appear a little bit different to others. We'll get to that in a little while. So now that we've got this open, we need to zoom back out so that you can see the full screen. What we're going to do here is I'll just go through some of the interface for you. And while we're at it, you can see that, you know, we've got the tracks here. There are 5 different tracks within a file group, which is how Wavelab kind of stores different things. Over here, we've got the little toolbar, and there's the project button there. And those options are also available on the menu as well. So if we go up to the menu, you'll see some of these things are up there as well. But we'll get to that again in a minute. So really what I want to do now is give you a quick tour of the interface, because for new users, and people have said this, even some more advanced users have said that the interface can come across quite intimidating, which is understandable. And that's partly because, well, 2 things. One is there's a heck of a lot you can do. And secondly is it's very configurable. So you may see things look different on one machine to another. And for example, I'm showing you my setup at the moment, which is based around the standard, but I still have things moved around a little bit. So I'm going to show you all how that works now. So just to point out again that we are in a project here, but it doesn't really matter at this point. The point with the project was when I opened it, it opened up all 5 of these tracks, which are contained within the project folder structure. And I'll show you that in a minute when we get onto the montage side, and I'll show you the actual folder structure. But like I said, the first thing I wanted to do is have a look around the interface, have a look around the screen, and there are literally hundreds of features all around, you know, in various places. So I think we'll break it down. I've got this set how I like it. I've got a 4K screen in front of me, and actually, whether you're looking in 4K or not, that's what you're seeing at the moment. You're seeing a 4K screen, so I've got everything distributed nicely. So I've got things kind of compressed down a little bit, because to me, they're already quite large, 4K screen at 55 inches or whatever it is. So the first thing is, pretty much everything you can see is movable and dockable. So, okay, let's say we're going to play this file. Now, I'm going to make sure that you don't hear that. But you can see some meters. There we go. We've got a spectrogram, oscilloscope, and so on and so forth. You can see various things happening. We've got a loudness meter here, phase scope, bit meter, the history of what you've done. Well, let's just leave that like that. And we're not actually broadcasting any audio at the moment because of the issue I mentioned earlier. But let's say you want that spectrometer there, or or the spectrograph, or any of these. Let's do the oscilloscope. Yeah, let's do that one. Let's say you wanted that to be larger and you wanted to pay more detail to it. We can literally just grab it, look, and you can see that as I'm moving it around, I'm kind of getting the option here to dock it somewhere else, or I can just leave it free floating and I can then grab hold of it, make it as big as I like. Let's do that. There we go. And play again. And you can see we've got that full screen. So super neat. And we can, of course, we could dock it somewhere else. You can see I've got all these docked here. And then there's a little button here, which would be difficult to see, I know, but we'll try and zoom in. And we can actually tell it to dock to the last place again. So now it goes back to where I had it originally, and there's no danger of losing anything. So that's all the basic metering and various other little tools we've got over here. The standard file explorer that lets you have a look. You can audition your files. They'll come up underneath here and you can play them, so on. The sample attributes, metadata. Again, not going to go into that today. Watch folders, very powerful, but again, not for today. So the nice thing is that once you have everything set up kind of how you like it, you can then go up to Workspaces and Layout, and you can save your layout however you like. So I can easily switch between, various choices. So if I wanted to go to my docked separate meters, there we are. And this has got all the meters in a little window in the center. And I want to go back to where I was. So we'll just go like that. All right, so that's the top area in my layout. Next, we have what we call the ribbon area. And this has a whole ton of features. A lot of them will depend on what you're doing, so what you have selected and so on. But we've got, as you can see, the view here, which is changing the way you view the files. We've got edit ability, so we can do a quick fade out. For example, we want to fade out there properly at the end. We'll just do that and we click fade out and you can see that's done. Or we can choose different types of fade and so on. So I'm going to undo that. And we'll again, just so that we can see the whole file. The insert, the processing, this is where we can do some kind of time stretching and level adjustments, correction, spectrum, which is another thing altogether. The analyze, which we'll get to in a minute. There's a couple of new features on this which are absolutely stunning. And then we have the render area, which is, when we output the actual file. So we'll leave that on view for now. Before we move on, let's just quickly explain about file groups. So you can see here that we've got this and it says file group, okay? So actually we can add another file group which has got nothing in it at all. And within that file group, we can then add either another audio file, a montage or a batch or a script or any of these various things, and they will then be contained in that group. So it's a good way to keep organized, good way to keep things separate from each other. So, all right, we've had a look at those. You've seen these little shortcut buttons over here as well, which enable you to do various things. There's the one that gives you the way to open the project from a zip archive, etc. Most of them are repeated in the menu, and again, you can use them all with key commands. So let's get to the main meat and potatoes. This is the main waveform area where you'll be looking at your file, or indeed, if it is a montage or batch mode, you'll be seeing all that in this area here where I've got this. Now, you might be looking at this thinking, wow, that's just a big, load of stuff on the screen. And it's actually very simple to get rid of that. You just double click. And now we've got, the stuff that we actually need right now to be working on, and to bring it back again, we can just do that. So I'm literally just double clicking in the bar there. Just a quick one in case anyone is looking at any of this closely. You can see that some of these files have got little yellow triangles there, color-coded, all of these things. So for example, if we make a change, let's say we select some of this file and just delete that, you'll see it goes red apart from also having an asterisk next to it. And again, difficult to show this stuff because it's obviously very small. And finally, before we move on to the next little section, just a quick note that we do have kind of a quite clever little layout area here. So you can see, if I zoom in, you can see that we can move things around. So for example, let's take the transport bar that's there at the moment. There's the transport bar in the layout area, and we can move that to the middle. We can move it to the bottom. We can hide it altogether, and so on. So there's lots of little tweaks that you can do with that kind of thing. And you'll notice that also it glowed bright pink when we moved it, just to show, hey, I'm here. So I like to have that up at the top there, dividing the whole section, you know, between the metering and the files. So finally, we've got the master section. And basically, the master section is the main output of Wavelab. So we've got a number of sections within it, but this is where everything will come and go through that, and then from the top all the way down to the bottom, and then out to wherever you're listening from. And in some cases, it won't reach the bottom section. We'll get to that in a second too. So if you're working on a single file, this is how it'll look. Again, if you want to see that a bit more clearly, let's just move it over a bit and make it bigger, so on. All right, and then we can zoom in a little bit and maybe have a closer look. So if we play now, you can see there's the main meters, and you can do things with those as well. You can lock them and so on. So the top section we've got of the master section, we've got our presets, which is where you can choose, you know, obviously presets, and presets will include, for example, any plugins that you decide to put into the master section. So we can load it up with plugins, and you will hear those at the moment, and they will also be included on the final render. That's the important part here. So let's just reset that. So obviously we have resampling here. You can imagine that basically what that does is it will resample your file in real time. So if I'm playing a 44.1 file, for example, and I want to hear it, I want my output to be at 48. Okay, I will turn that on. As it is at the moment, we're on 48 anyway. Next, we have the actual meters, which can be controlled, but we like to have them locked just to avoid mistakes. So we'll put those back where they were. We'll keep them locked. You also have a true peak analyzer there. And final effects and dithering, well, that is exactly what it says. That is where you would put your dither plugin if you were using one, and any other final effects that you wanted to. But basically, for a single file, the master section is the place to be. So now we can move on to my favorite new feature of Wavelab 12, which is the playback processing section of the master section. And I'll show you. Let's get into it. I'm particularly happy about this because I had a lot of input on it myself. In fact, it was my request. I'm sure a lot of people had requested it as well, but officially, and Philippe Gauthier, the developer of, or one of the main developers of Wavelab, is always very receptive to new ideas and just an all-round great guy to deal with. And he's implemented this in such a way that it works within the existing kind of Wavelab framework. And yeah, let's have a look. So the playback processing section is at the bottom of the master section here, and I'm just going to move that up a little bit so that we can see it clearly, and we'll zoom in a little bit more as well, I think, so that you can see this. So what we've got now is the ability to bind plugins to certain sections of the playback area. You may remember in the past, we've always had a few buttons here, okay, but they were basically able to send your audio signal to different outputs. But what we've got now is the ability to bind plugin sets to go with those particular outputs. So for example, this is my main output, which is the speakers. And you can see here, I've got a track control and I've got a sound ID reference. I've got a whole load of others. And then when we get over here, we've got my main headphones. And there we have can opener and we have sound ID reference. But you can see quickly that the reference is set to my headphones. If we go back to the original one, you can see that the sound ID is for my reference monitors. And also this one here, for example, will direct things to my OBS, which is what you're listening to now. And if I click that and play, then you'll hear it. And then I've got various other things. I've got Waves NX on one of my headphone outputs. I've got DAVR on one of the headphone outputs. On one of the main monitors, I've got sound ID. Just show you. Sound ID is emulating mix cubes. Oops, just drag that over. So I can click between a standard listen and a mix cubes listen. So how do we do that? Okay, the first thing we need to do is make sure that you've got your audio connections set up. So if I go to File here, and we'll go to Preferences, and we'll go to Audio. You should be able to see this. Just bring it in. So basically what I've done, I've set up the maximum amount, I've set up 8 different audio connections. This is playback, we're not talking about recording here. So there's my main monitors, which is out of my device port, ACO 1 and 2. The mix cubes, I've called it mix cubes here, it'll be the same. See, there's a speaker arrangement here, you've got 8 of those. So then we'd go to speaker arrangement 3, there's headphones, and that's my headphone output on my RME Fireface. Another headphones, same output here. Another headphones, same output. Another headphones, same output. And then another output, different pair of headphones, and then my OBS. So if we go back here, and the reason that these are all kind of making logical sense is because you can name your ports in the audio connections window. So there you can see, for example, analog 7 and 8 is my headphones 1 and 2. So I'm going to charge on, I'm going to move on through this quite quickly because you can always watch it back again. And as you know, what I will do is, put chapter markers on the YouTube video once it's finished processing. And then, if you ever need to come back to it, you can dive straight back. So basically, we've set up our 8 different sections, how we like them. 2 of them are through the main monitors and most of them are through the headphones. You can then save that as a preset so you don't risk losing it. Or if you ever change your setup, or if you're in the habit of changing it backwards and forwards, you can change it. And I've just called this here PAP24, all 8 assigned. So that is my basic thing. And that's what I'll use all the time. Ignore the rest of it. Not worried about that at the moment. So those 8 outputs coincide with the 8 buttons that we have here. So there's the main monitors, for example. So how do we get it to a stage where we can be switching between these different outputs and have different plugins bound to them? Well, it's very simple. So let's add a plugin here. Let's say we wanted supervision. So we'll put supervision, Steinberg supervision. We'll put that there. We can play. You can see supervision. Yeah, I really like to have that. Now, don't forget the whole point of this playback processing section is it is playback only. So it doesn't get rendered. And that is one of the key points here. Should have probably pointed that out earlier, but I'm going to mention it again a couple of times. The playback processing section does not get rendered. So this is why you will put things like your sound ID reference or your Waves NX or any of those things that are an aid for listening, but not to affect the final file. All right. So we've put supervision in there. Supervision doesn't make any sound, so it wouldn't really matter if it was rendered, but why would you want to render or export the audio through that? Okay, so we've put it there. We'll close it down. And what we're going to do now is we'll move to a different preset. And we'll move back again. And, oh dear, you can see that supervision has gone. And this is because we didn't bind the plugin with that sound output preset. So what we're going to do, we will add it again, supervision. Let's bring it up. There she is. That's my default supervision layout. All right. So how do we make that permanent so that every time we bring back the main monitors, you're going to see supervision? And it's quite simple. There's a little button here. It's called Plugin Association. We click that, and we can either remove everything that was already there, remove the binding. It doesn't remove the plugins. Bind with current playback plugins. So we'll click that. We'll get a little message that tells us the current preset thing will be overwritten. OK to confirm, and we're done. So now if I move to any of these others, and then move back again, you'll see that our supervision is now there. Right, so observe also the fact that supervision and in fact all the other plugins in the playback section, you may have seen them pop up, but they don't exist on the full screen anywhere. And there's the full screen just so you can see. So if, for example, you wanted supervision to become open like that, when you do that, basically it remembers the positions of the plugins. So if we bind supervision now, or bind those particular plugins with output 1, and then move to a different preset, and then if we move back again, you'll see that supervision now appears open. All right. So that's about it on the playback processing section. What I'm going to do is just remove that. And then I'm going to bind again. And so now I'm back to how I was before with my track control there, which is just to enable me to do various little things. And all the other settings, you'll see, I think one of these, like you did probably just now, if I click this one, Waves NX. So that is outputting to my headphones, but you also see that the Waves NX, this is the Abbey Road Studio, comes up. And of course, the sound ID is there, but with the headphones preset. So it's basically like having a super powerful little routing area for the playback section of Wavelab. It's a bit like the control room from Cubase and Nuendo. Very powerful, very useful, and I know a lot of people, once you get your head around it all, like I said, feel free to go back the video, skim through, have a look at what I did, and I'm sure you'll find it super useful. Even if, okay, let's say you only have one pair of monitors and a pair of headphones. So you set up the monitors in your audio connections 3 or 4 times, right? The same outputs. But then in the playback section in Wavelab here, you could have one output set to nothing at all. You could have one output set to reverse the stereo. You could have one output set with sound ID, one without, and so on and so forth. But don't forget, as I said earlier, this does not get rendered. So it's, you know, one of those things. When I did videos on how to use Waves NX, for example, and people were saying, well, how do I export this without rendering it? Well, in Cubase and Nuendo, we have it easy because we have the control room. So we put those kinds of things in control room, and then when you go to export your file, it doesn't get rendered. In Wavelab, we now have the same possibility to do that, which we always had, but now we've got the possibility to do it with multiple different settings for different outputs. Okay, whew, that was a mouthful, but we got through it. And like I said, I hope you'll find that super useful. I'm really happy that that has been added. So what I'm going to do, let's just dock the master section back where it was for now. So everything's back to normal, and we'll move on. So let's go back to full screen for a minute. And what we're going to do now is we'll set up for a little mastering project of an album. Now, our friend Justin has done a much more detailed version of this in an earlier version of Wavelab, and I'm sure he'll be doing another one for Wavelab 12, showing you some of the really advanced stuff good old Justin does. But I'm going to go through the basics of setting up a little album for mastering. So let's move back to full screen, and you can see that we've still got our 5 simple audio files. And in fact, I'm going to use those because I will have to do this at some point when these are all finished without my guide vocals and so on and so forth. I will be making a master project for this little kind of EP. It's a 5-track EP. So, camera off. There's a number of ways that we could do this. We could use the Startup Assistant and choose a blank template of any, you know, the kind that we like. Or we could use a file group here. We could go to the plus button here. We could go to Audio Montage. And again, you've got the same templates that you'll find in the Startup Assistant. Quick zoom in there so you can see those. Various options. So 48K album, and then you get to title it and so on and so forth. Again, we're going to do that, but we're not going to do it this way because I'm going to show you a nice little trick. So let's go back out to full screen. Get rid of that for now. We'll close that file group because we're not using it. It's empty. So what we're going to do is, you'll see we've got these 5 tracks here, and we can right-click on any of those. There's a whole ton of options. This is the thing with Wavelab, is anywhere you click, there is, you know, various helpful options. So we're going to make a new montage with all these files in it. And instead of having to drag them and move them around, what we're going to do is right click, create audio montage from all audio file tabs. And we'll do that. Now we get the same screen that you saw a little bit earlier. I'll go to my mega zoom. And you can see here, this is the path of the project. So the project, the album name is Habeas Corpus, which is my friend's name for the album. And this is going to go inside the montages folder. All right. So let's call this Habeas Mastering. And we're going to put the montage folder within that project, Habeas Corpus. And we could, of course, save later as well. We can just make this and then, you know, decide to save it later on. But we're going to do it all right now. And you can also append the montage name. So if we did that, you would get these, the whole thing would be inside that project, montages, Habeas Mastering. So let's leave that like this. We'll leave it in the project location. Incidentally, there's a drop-down list that gives you some more options and, you know, variable values. It's so powerful. And we'll just go create. Okay, so now we have the next little dialogue. So we want to make a montage that enables us to control all these individual tracks separately. So where are we going to insert the files? We're going to put them on tracks. We're not going to worry about lanes right now. So we're going to put them on tracks, separate tracks in the montage. And because it's a mastering project rather than like a radio or a podcast, we're going to offset on several tracks. So if we did stack, then each file would be stacked on a separate track and they'd all be, on top of each other but on separate tracks. Stagger would put them on 2 tracks but alternate, so it'd be 1, 2, 1, 2. And then of course line up would put them all on the same track. So we're going to go to offset on several tracks and going to hit OK. And actually before I do this, let's just go back to the full screen. So when I hit OK now, this is what I was talking about earlier. So copy the files to the audio montage folder. Now, we already have those files in that project, but if I want to make any changes to them, I might not want to destroy the ones that we were working on as individual files. So I'm going to tell it to copy to the montage folder. And you can keep the option for all future. I've left this off for now because I wanted to be able to show it to you. And the destination subfolder, once again, we can make our own name, but we'll leave it. We'll just call it audio. And if we hit OK, voila, let's go back out. And you can see that it's now created this montage for us. And there are the 5 tracks all lined up. Literally, there is no gaps or anything here. They're lined up one after the other, getting ready for us to work on. And while we're at it, before we move on, I want to just quickly show you the folder structure. So we'll zoom in, and if I quickly just open here and zoom in again, you can see there is our Wavelab projects. There's habeas corpus. And inside that, we now have everything that we were working on in that project. That's the project file, habeas corpus WPR, that's the Wavelab project. There's the original 5 audio files. There's some other things which we don't need to worry about. There's the habeas mastering folder, which is the one we've just created, the montage, and the copy of the audio, and of course all the waveform pictures, as it were, the way it does that, and some other stuff, some caching and so on. So basically everything, this is what I was saying earlier, everything we need is within that project folder. And if I zip that up and send it to you, you could open exactly what we're seeing right now. Okay. And you can see that the files are all nicely lined up and ready for us to work on. And of course, we can grab those, we can move them around a little bit if we wanted to. And I'm doing this on purpose because I want to show you another new and improved feature. So let's first of all make this full size. So we don't need to see the metering and so on. So what I'd like to do now, open up the new album toolbox. And there you can see we've got a new window. Basically, there is your album. Now, at the moment, there's nothing in it. If we select any of these, you're not going to see anything happening. They're just random clips at the moment. There's nothing. So what we need to do here, we can go down to Functions and Album Wizard. And now you can see that we've got various settings. Again, far too much to be going into right now, but these are my defaults for now that enable us to lay out the album how we want it. So, for example, we've got 2-second gaps between each track and so on and so forth. Let's just apply that and you'll see what happens. Okay, so first thing you'll have noticed is that all the tracks, and we can zoom in if you like, all the tracks now have 2-second gaps between them. There's some markers that have been placed here. And you can see on the album tab that it's got the timing information, the length of each track, the pre-gap, the post-gap, the amount of pause, which is 2 seconds for each one. And we also had an option there to add some ISRC code. So actually, if we go back again to the album wizard, you can see that we could, let's generate some ISRC codes. So I think if we put, for example, A, and then the rest has to be numbers, so we'll call them 0, 0, 0. Let's call it 0, 0. That's the correct length, and then you can tell it by what you would like to increase it by. We'll plus by 10, and we'll hit apply. And now you can see it's also assigned the ISRC codes for us in the album wizard. If we have a look at the clips, these are the individual clips. We can now also step through them like this. I may want to be able to see them a little bit clearer. And, you know, basically we're all set now to master the album. Everything is laid out how we like it. We can also lock those, which I will do right now just to show you. If I go back to the clips area and just click this little button here, we can lock them all in position so they don't accidentally get moved. So even if I now grab that and try to move it around, it will not move, although I can do things like add volume fades and so on and so forth. We're not going to actually use the master section here. We're going to use the inspector. So the master section, yes, everything is still going through it. And the playback configuration that we talked about earlier, everything is set up as it was, but we now have the inspector. So there it is. Let's drag it out from where I normally have it. And you'll see that there's 4 sections here in the inspector. So what do they do? Okay, well, actually, very self-explanatory. We can put the camera on for a second. So you can see the clip area there. Well, the clip is what is applied to each individual clip. So you can see as I'm selecting those, in fact, yeah, maybe camera off so you can see better. As I'm selecting back. So let's take that, or if we move to blinded, that's blinded by the light. And you can see up here that what we're looking at is each individual clip. It changes depending on which clip we have selected. So track is the same thing, except for it's relevant to which track we have selected. All right, so you can see again that that's changing here, track 5, track 1. The group we're not using at the moment. This displays the plugins for a track group, so we could put 2 tracks into one group, for example. And we'll skip that for now because we can cover the idea of that by showing you the output, which is the main output of the montage. Right. So how do we put this into kind of practical use? I've got the clip part selected, and I'm going to put a Q there, Pro Q. Let's put Pro Q3 there. And do whatever we need to do, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, that's playing that. That's playing through. You can see over on the right here, the master section. It was extremely loud because of what I've just done. And then we're going to move on to the next track. And you see, as soon as I select that clip, the plugins disappear. So if we go back to the first clip, there the plugin is, Pro Q. If we go to the next clip, and of course, if it's something that you like, so you've got this first track set up and there's a certain group of plugins that you like, it's very easy to save them or copy them to the other clips and then work on them again. So if I, for example, wanted to load a plugin chain, here's one of my previous ones, very old actually, this one. And you can see there, I've loaded that plugin chain into that clip, but not any of the others. So if I move around, you can see that only when I select that clip do we have that bunch of plugins. And we could use that same bunch of plugins in the next clip, but with slightly different settings, for example. So, you know, let's clear that off, remove all plugins from active clip, and let's select another one. And again, this one here, we can select and we can load in, and there you have. Basically, you're going through each clip, and the nice thing about having it on a montage is that you get an idea of the overall sound of the album as well. Aside from that, there's a lot of other advanced things we can do. Again, not got time to go into it today, but there's, for example, the new null track, which enables you to pull in what you've just rendered and enables you to, do a null test basically to see what the difference is. And that's super powerful, but again, not for now. So that's clips and tracks. So, okay, on that particular track, there might be 2 clips. We might have split that in half, or there might be 2 songs, if you were using that method. So this way you can also, and there's some built-in stuff as well here, enhance and clean and so on. But basically the way it works is that the plugins that are inserted on that clip do not affect that clip, and so on and so forth. All right, so, okay, that's great. But what if, let's just clear that off. Remove all plugins. So we're back to square one now. So what if we've added all our plugins to these individual sections, but then there's some things that we're going to have in common, and of course that's where the output section comes in. So this is where you would probably put your master limiter. For example, the brick wall, Steinberg brick wall limiter, you could put that on the output section. So that means you don't have to repeat that every single time. And again, don't forget the playback section is still going to be showing you what you're hearing. So if I went to Sound ID here, you can see that the meters are still moving, but not being included. And some people actually like to use plugins on the master section as well, which would then be rendered, as part of the overall thing. So let's take a little scenario. I have been working on this individual file, and I have inserted a particular bunch of plugins on that one file. So we're out of the montage right now. We're on just one single file, right? So let's say, and I loaded up the master section, and I'm like, I really like that. And then we go over to our montage, and I'm like, I'm going to have to recreate. So what you can do now with the inspector, again, we'll drag it over. There we go. What we could do now is have that clip selected, and we could go to menu, and we could go import master section plugins, and that will bring in anything that's in your master section over to that particular clips plugins. So there you go. Again, there's more stuff that can be done here, but I think we've covered the basics of setting up to master for an album. And of course, the final thing is that when we're done, we can then go over to render, and we can choose the format, we can choose the naming, we can do all sorts of things. Again, far too much. And many, many more options than you have from your normal DAW. And we then go to start rendering, and we can either render the whole thing as one file, if you wanted to just send it off, as what in one piece, or we can render individual files, or we can then, there's so many things that you can do when you come to the final rendering. So I have 2 more things that I would like to show you. Don't forget, usual thing, I know I've skipped through this, but, I kind of figured, well, first of all, we've got the problem that I can't really play you anything. So what would be the point of building up all individual plugins and showing you what they do? I think the main thing is really just that quick section, which again, I will bookmark on YouTube, just to show you how to set up, a nice way to set up for a mastering project. And once again, a quick reminder, if we went up and we did a save, now everything we've done all resides in that project folder, which is super useful. And I could then zip it up, send it over to you, you unzip it, and off we go. Of course, you'd have to have the plugins in question. Right, so I just want to show you a couple of the new little things that I'm absolutely in love with. So let's just pull up a normal audio file, and let's go and look down here at Rainbow Waveform. So you can see immediately that it's done some very odd things. What has it done? Well, you can choose actually what it does. We've got the Rainbow Waveform settings here. What I've done is I've got this set up to everything gray except for 2 kilohertz is in blue and 8 kilohertz is in red. So these are kind of my favorite problem areas. So you can set these up how you like. There's a whole bunch of them included. Ian Stewart's done a few as well, and there are some from a friend of mine, Alberto, has done this tape tones, and basically gives you a quick visual overview of what's happening in that wave file. So yeah. So there's my favorite, which is 2 and 8K, because I like to have a quick look and see how much really obvious 8K have we got in the file, you know, and so on. And of course, the other thing is that you can do is to just make it quite pretty, which, you know, if you feel like it. And then we can turn that back off. You can set up your own, save them as presets, and then we'll just go back to normal. We've then got this little feature here, which is auto zoom to peaks. So if I click that, you'll see that it's lit up yellow, and you've seen a little thing there that came up at 0.1. If I zoom in, you see we've got a minus 4.7 there, and the metering on the side, or the ruler, whatever you'd like to call it, has adjusted so that the whole waveform is zoomed in. So if I move to the end here, you'll see that this is now going from infinite dB to -8. If I go to a particular loud part, then you'll see that it's going from infinite to 0 because, you know, it needed full range for that. The other thing you might notice while I'm selecting, I don't know how clear this is, so we might have to zoom in again. But if we do, yeah, let's zoom in. You can see that while I'm selecting this, there's some little purple areas appearing. So it's pointing out the transients for you. Some of the new favorites are on the Analyze ribbon here. So we're going to do this now then. If I do that, this should be much, much clearer. So we've got the 3D analysis, which gives you a nice 3D picture. And it shows you, you know, what's going on within the file in a 3D, if you feel that way inclined. We have the global analysis, and all we need to do here is, let's say, actually, let's not change anything. Let's just go analyze with the factory defaults. And you'll see it's telling us that the digital peaks are true peaks, the loudness, other things, number of errors, and so on, find possible glitches, and so on. So you can get a lot of info about your file from the global analysis. We've got a loudness analysis. Let's quickly do that. And again, whole ton of info for those of you that, you know, really need this fine detail. And finally, the visual analysis. Let's just leave it set as it is. Analyze, and hopefully now you can see we've got things being drawn. We've got true peaks in red. We've got RMS loudness in orange. It's a curve. If we fade out the waveform, you can see it much clearer. It's sort of slightly faded. We've got the loudness range. If I just select all those and analyze, and then close this box down, and then double click, you can hopefully see that a little bit more clearly. There's the RMS in the orange line there of the RMS. The loudness range is in that faded area, and so on. And of course, in order to get rid of that, we just press this little trash button here, and it's gone. So before we start our mastering session, once we've got the files in place like this, a nice thing to do is we go to Process and we go to the Meta Normalizer. And what this will do is look at the entire clips and give you kind of an average, I suppose you want to call it. take everything down to whatever you choose. There's certain, again, there's presets. Justin, again, has done some of these. So if we did that, we'd do that now. And Wavelab is analyzing the whole album, and it's now normalized down to 16, minus 16 LUFS, I believe it was. Yeah. So now everything's starting at a nice base, and that is then when you would open the inspector and start adding your plugins and so on. So there you go. So I think that will do for Wavelab for now. We are running out of time as usual. But not to worry, I have one more little thing that I'd like to show you for those of you who are Cubase or Nuendo users. So we can basically just close down Wavelab now. I'm not going to save any of that, but of course, as I've been stressing all the way along, because we're using this project file, if I go to save, it'll ask us to save, or we could just literally save that now, and everything we've done, including any edits, any changes to the visual style, you name it, everything is saved within that project file. Then, of course, how easy is it to do consolidate, which then copies all the media into the project folder, and you can then zip that up. And in fact, you can open a project zip archive, and, you know, easy to pass things backwards and forwards, but not only that, easy to back things up for yourself as well. Right, let's close down Wavelab 12. Thank you very much, Philippe, for all the beautiful new features. I wish we had time to go through them all. There's so many. But we're going to close that down. I am not going to save, so we're going to quit without saving. And here we are with Nuendo. And the final thing I wanted to show you, which is still relevant to Wavelab, is that we now have Wavelab as an ARA process. So those of you familiar with ARA, well, you'll already know what I'm going to do here, but let's just select this audio file and make sure we're in the right place. Here, there we go. And we'll select that, and we'll go up to the menu. We'll go Audio Extensions, Wavelab ARA. There she is. This is Wavelab in ARA mode. So that's my audio file. As you can see, you know how it works with ARA. We can zoom in now. How it works, we can use the controls from Nuendo or Cubase to control everything. But now we have all those lovely features from Wavelab available within Nuendo. Let's see, we can do the global analysis that we did earlier on. This is all within Nuendo now. There's all the other tools, of course, that we can use. If we wanted to do a quick fade out, we can do that. We can undo it. If we wanted to recover some stuff, if we wanted to process and do some pitch and time and resampling and reversing, and all those powerful tools that we have in Wavelab are now available as an ARA process in Nuendo. And of course, the final thing that you would do once you've finished doing anything, if it was just analyzing, well, you would just go up here and you would go to Audio Extensions, Remove Extension, or if it was some audio processing, then you would make it permanent. So yeah, Wavelab inside Nuendo. Fantastic. So I think we're pretty much there today. Let's go back to main camera. Hey, hello. And thanks for sticking with us, those of you. I know it's a tricky one today because there wasn't really any exciting music to play. And I always ask this, if anybody's got any suggestions on that, feel free, let me know. I have a bunch of tracks, of course, that are unreleased. But even that is tricky because what if I release them later? Then the recordings become flagged by YouTube. So if you've got any suggestions on that one, how to deal with it, I'd be interested to know. I've searched a bit about it and can't seem to find any hard and fast info. Some people are saying, well, if you only play 3 seconds of the audio, it won't get muted and so on. And especially live, if it's a pre-recorded video, that's different because I can whitelist it later on. If it's one of my own songs, I can whitelist it. But when it's a live stream, you can't do that. So any suggestions on that one? Anyway, I think, if anything else, we realized today how many features there are in these applications. I mean, we know Nuendo and Cubase are just full of stuff. And Wavelab has now raised its game much higher than it was even before, which was already very, very high. And all these new features just make it incredibly, I wouldn't say easy, but incredibly intuitive and powerful. And they give you ways to make your audio better than it ever was. So how's that, you know, for a summary? Thanks ever so much for being with us. Thanks, Terry, for looking after the chat. And like I said, you know the routine, everything will be marked, and I will see you next month. Super mega large. Thanks for joining me.